Not your average tabletop. Woohoo!
Welcome back to Not Your Average Tabletop. I'm Zach.
And I'm Pepper.
And what are we doing today, Pepper, with this classic?
Again, I do this all the time. I almost said first impressions, but if we were having our first impressions on Settlers of Catan, that'd be interesting. Having waited that long, what are we, like a decade into our gaming careers?
Yeah, I always forget how long it's been. I don't know.
I know.
Probably not quite a decade.
Not quite, but
yeah,
you probably played some of those early games almost 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we are giving our CHIPPI review for the Settlers of Catan, or Catan. I don't believe there are any big gameplay changes.
Or Settlers.
Or Settlers, or soon to be of.
As we all know, the of.
But yeah, you've probably heard a lot about it. It's one of the most popular games in the world for quite a while now, and a lot of people's entry into the modern hobby board gaming.
And I think it actually came out in, was it 1995? So that might not be the exact right year, but it's right around there.
Around there.
And it's kind of crazy that it's still hanging around there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely, you got other games like Monopoly that stay around, and Uno and stuff that have been around for longer and keep staying. But I mean, for it being a kind of, I don't even know, it would kind of the first of some of the modern board games, and still being thought of as still a very solid game, and a game that gets people in the hobby. I mean, that's a pretty good thing about the game.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Because some of those other ones, I guess I don't know how old Ticket to Ride is. It's probably getting up there too, but I don't know if it's that old. But it has a lot of expansions and stuff, so I feel like it has to be getting up there too. But so that's kind of probably, I would guess that'd be probably one of most people's first few games that they got or played when getting into the hobby. And I think this was, I can't remember which Ticket to Ride Europe or this one I played with the Myers. I don't remember which order. But yeah, they were both kind of some of the first two. So then had to obviously get them because really loved the game. So I would have said at one point probably, if not Ticket to Ride, this one was either my probably favorite game of all time or number two before I got further into the hobby.
When you had two.
You're right.
You're either one or two. But yeah, going on to our CHIPPI scale, which is our way to rate games between different, like C is core mechanics, history, investment, presentation, preference, it factor. And then we kind of balance those out a little differently for how important we think each is to an overall rating.
Right, yeah. We got them weighted slightly differently, but we kind of, The it factor kind of is the thing kind of at the end where you can kind of give it a 10 if you really want it to be a little bit of a higher score, because there's something about it that either makes it feel like no other game, or else if it gives you some nostalgia or something like that. But let's just get right into the core mechanics.
Yes, this is getting right into it.
After a huge intro. Well, my core mechanics, I've got 6.5 on that one. Which
hasn't aged well for you.
It has not quite aged well, because I'm sure when I first played this, I would have thought, wow, this is like some of the greatest stuff, and it's still very solid, don't get me wrong, because that dice rolling for the resource production for everyone, that is a solid mechanic. That's also been, we know it most from Space Base as well. I really like that, where everyone benefits from it, or everyone's invested in every dice roll, even if you're not the active player. I really like that in a game. So, especially for a game that's that old now and had something that innovative. That's a really solid mechanism. So that's still probably my favorite part of the game, I think, at this point. But then you've got like the race to 10 points, which I think any games where you're racing to a certain amount of points can always help it or hurt it, kind of the flow of the game. And then you're just kind of, getting the resources from that production and using those resources to build buildings, which has now been done more and more. And then you've got the robber when 7s are rolled, I think is kind of the other mechanism. And that's kind of one that I think has grown to really be something that I can see where it's used. I think I'm fine with the robber itself, but I don't like so much the you have to have 7 or less cards or else you lose half of them. I think that's probably really the part that irks me more than just the robber itself. Like,
Yeah.
when the robbers, because the robber can be used to cover up production pieces, which is unique. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It kind of, it's a spot that may have been a hot spot, maybe an 8 or a 6, and it was maybe producing a lot for you. Because you might have maybe 2 different settlements around it. All of a sudden, that's blocked off, so whenever that number's rolled, you don't get that resource. So it is an interesting thing, but
I think losing half of your hand, maybe
I think that's probably the part.
Maybe
that
just
actually
have it.
I don't
Maybe
like.
whoever rolls it then gets a card from your hand or something like that.
Which you do.
Yeah,
But
you get that,
just-
but maybe an additional one if you have that
Oh,
much more.
right.
Or just lose
Yeah.
one card or 2. Or,
Yeah.
I don't know. Because it can be tough. Because sometimes you can't really control it. You're set up at 5, and you're like, okay, I'm good. And then you just produce more on other people's turns and get over there. And then you have to get rid of half, which took away some of the ones that you had at the beginning that you really needed.
Right. Yeah. I think it's probably. Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's not so much the robber that I don't like. It's that fact that you have to get rid of all those cards. Because sometimes too, like I've had some games where you're not getting anything, not getting anything, not getting anything, and then all of a sudden you have a round where I'm getting a lot of stuff. And then you roll the 7.
Yeah.
And then you get rid of
That-
It's like I've waited so many rounds for that,
Yeah.
and then that happens.
Yeah, it's always like, oh, it's my turn. Oh, no, we're not out of the woods yet.
Right, right. Because, I do typically like that kind of tension in games, but I feel like in this one sometimes there's so much more. Now that I've played more games, there's just so much more disappointment when the 7 is rolled. Usually I like that where it's like, oh, there's a little bit of
I think
almost not. It's not really even press your luck because it's not like you're trying to be greedy and hogging all the cards.
Yeah.
It's just that you happen to have got your numbers hit over and over.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that could also have to do with sometimes it can take a long time to build up, for sure. I gave it a little higher. I gave it an 8.25. I really love the roll the dice everyone produces. And it's so simple. And we play with kind of just a variable setup, not even just the tiles, but also the numbers and where they go. So I just love looking at that initial board, be like, where do I want to go? Where are the spots that I'm going to build my settlements? And just the rolling of dice. I love the rolling of the dice and getting the resources. It's so simple. And I don't know. There's just something about it. I love space-based for the same reason. I think the trading, actually works. Trading can be a little complicated in some games. It seems like something that hasn't always been handled the best. But this one is just very simple, straightforward. And again, for one of the first big hobby games to come out to have trading in it as well, just seems like it had that, and that innovative dice production is just really interesting that it has quite a few things actually that don't feel like basic things.
right.
But yeah, it can drag on a little bit, but I think, and a lot of times we play 2-player, and we didn't know that it actually isn't a 2-player game, so there
For some reason we didn't realize that.
And we've been playing, we just discovered it, like when we were going to play this for like a playthrough video, we discovered it. So this whole time, since the beginning of our gaming careers,
Right.
we've been okay playing this 2-player, when really you should use a variant. I think I think there's an official variant which kind of adds extra dice rolls, which I think really would speed it up quite a bit, because I think that's one of the drawbacks, is a game can really be decided and drawn out by the dice rolls, and I guess a game can really turn from one person's favor to another, which is a good thing, I think, at times, to always feel like you can do it. I like the temporary points in the game, and it's kind of one of those where getting to 10 points, every point feels big. But yeah, that's that. On to our history, which easily is a 10 for us. It's one of the first games we ever played.
Right, and that's probably why we played it that way and never really looked back at the rule book and just assumed that that's how it was fine to play it. But yeah, I honestly, if I had to guess or say, like what was on the box for player count, I would have guessed 2 to 4. I don't know why. I never realized it was 3 to 4, but
Yeah.
Then we get into investment. So yeah, that for me is a 6.5. Because I don't know. It seems like the more and more times I've played this, and it usually ends up being like a 4 or 5 player game of it. It just kind of goes on a bit long, and I feel like you get to a point sometimes where sometimes who can't win and like still has a potential to win, and then you're kind of just sitting around waiting for it to end. And the thing with the game too is I think kind of very loose and open at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it starts like really slowing down and closing at the end. Now that I've played more games, like the first times I played this, and when you're getting into it, you don't notice these things, but then like you see this and you're like, once a player gets like 8 points, it's pretty much people are putting embargoes on trading with them. They won't trade with them anymore. So then you have to either trade with the other players and get stuff, or if you're that player, you're like, well, now I need to produce the rest of the stuff by myself because no one's going to trade me, any resources because, maybe I have a hidden victory point and they don't want to risk giving me the card that gets me that last point.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. I'm not saying that's bad gameplay or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, but I think that ends up like, it's one of those things in those games that just prolongs the game.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's not as bad as it, but like Unstable Unicorns or something, or one of those types of games where you can like steal from an opponent and then they go from having, 3 to back to 2 or 1 all of a sudden, and it just keeps you kind of go after one player because they're ahead and then kind of let the rest of the group get back in. I think that just kind of can kind of bring it or make it drag on a little longer than I'd like.
I had 7.5 for this. I think, it can drag on, and it's probably going to feel pretty similar from game to game, but also I think kind of the arcs in the game kind of like that, seeing one person get this way and no one trades with them and maybe someone else advances a little higher. I think each game's going to feel a little different, and with variable setup, if you have that, I think that adds a little bit to that. And plus, there's a ton of expansions, and we only have Seafarers, I believe, but I mean that could add different replayability for investment as well. Plus, I think that, it's probably a must play for sure, probably must own, and I think it's a great one to
maybe not must own, but I think you'll want to try it at least once.
Just because so many people have played it, it's good to have it in the collection. So if someone comes over and they're only familiar with that, I think it's in that way a good investment as well, because it's going to be open to a lot of people.
That's true. Then we get into presentation.
Interesting.
What are you going to shot?
Being an older one, this is actually an 8. I'll give it.
Huh.
It is very vibrant, very colorful. I know when we were doing the playthrough, we set up the camera, and it's like, wow, that board looks really good, especially on this kind of black background, the water. I just really love the look of that, and the different tiles, and it's very clear kind of what produces what, and the art on the resources is good, the wooden bits are good, the dice are nice. I enjoy pretty much everything it has to offer.
Yeah, I had this as an 8, and I moved it down to a 7.5 because you reminded me, and I saw the insert. And, because, I agree with everything. I have pretty much everything you just said. But the insert, to me, doesn't quite fit everything just right.
Yeah. And this is the older version.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, I'm not sure what the newer one looks like, but this one in particular is just not the greatest. It's not the worst insert, but it has a few pieces of it that work really well.
Yeah.
But then a few pieces that it's just like, I don't know why you made it really work well here, but then not so much here. So it's almost, to me, it's almost like I want to take the plastic insert out and not. But the worst part is it holds those tiles really nicely, but then like the rest of it doesn't fit in there the greatest.
Yeah. And then the cards are in one of these little slide boxes, which they don't fit in there at all.
When you have the double,
and then they kind of slide out the little bottom. So for the first time, just after playing it for these videos, I was like, I'm just taking them out of there and putting them in a bag. I don't know why we never did. It's always a pain in the butt.
Well, I think the worst part too is this fits in the insert.
Yes,
right.
It does.
Just doing the cards in a bag doesn't fit in there as well.
Yeah.
So it's that's one of my big peeves, but the rest of it looks really solid.
Yeah.
Preference. I've got this one at a 6, so it's not my first choice, but occasionally I'll play a game of it. I usually probably want to play this one only once, maybe twice a year. Not really one that I'm ever going to pull off the shelf, but like you said, having it available to other people. If other people are playing it and I'm in the mood, I'll play it, but it kind of just depends, because there's just sometimes where I just don't really feel like playing it. But then too, I mean, if it were to only be, with me, be like a 3-player game, then I think I'd be much more willing to play it. I think it's just when it starts getting up to 5 or 6 players that I don't know. There's something about that I can only handle that about once a year, because it just gets to be a lot, and I feel like usually 1 or 2 players, like I said, about halfway through, seem to just be totally out of it, just because of the rolls and the limited space on the board. They just kind of get locked into a place, and then they may not produce resources that allow them to do anything. To be able to continue to get points. So they're just kind of sitting there rolling the dice, hoping. I don't even know. I think you get to a point where you don't even hope. You're just kind of like, I'm hoping I roll for someone else so that they can finish this game. But I'd still willing to play it. Still a 6, but not one that I'm going to probably recommend myself.
I actually have this at an 8.25.
What? You're such a liar.
8.25. I think it's probably the lack of plays. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. But also this, I think you played it a lot with the Myers, but this isn't really one that I played a lot through our gaming career. I always call it. That sounds a little weird, but it's not the most played of those early games for me. Like, I don't know. I mean, I might have hit 20, like, not counting kind of playing on apps and stuff like that. I don't know if I've really played it too many over 10. Like, it's not like Carcassonne where I played that, like, dozens of times. So I think I haven't outplayed it like you have. So yeah, and just kind of that dice mechanism in production, I just really like that. Putting your guys on the board, seeing what you get.
Yeah, I can definitely see why you could still like it. It still has very solid mechanisms in it.
It factor. What did you give this?
I gave it a 6. Because it's still one of those that it's not like I've totally written it off. Like, I never really want to play this at all. Like I said, I think I'd be. I might get to the point where I would suggest to play it if I hadn't played it in like over a year. So it's not like one that I'm like, I never want to play this again. Because it just has probably spot in my heart for it, because being one of those original ones, and still, even though I've played all these other games, it still holds up pretty well. I mean, there's some things in it that now feel a little restrictive that didn't before, compared to some games. But I mean, at the same time, it's still, I mean, even though I've played, a few hundred other games now, it's still, better than some of them for me. So
yeah, for sure.
Well, more than some probably, but it's you might not expect that from first game that you play.
Yeah. Yeah, I give this a 7.25. I think it factor, just being Catan, brings a lot of it factor just with how famous this game is. And yeah, we have played so many games, but it still it delivers a different feel to most of those games, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy how it can. It still does feel like it stands out, and I don't know how it managed to do that after all these years.
Yeah. So that brings me to a total Chippy rating of 8.2. I still really like the game. It can draw on, but I think once you accept that and just know the game, know what you're getting into, I think it's a fun game.
Yeah, that gives me an overall of a 6.9.
Wow.
But no, it's still,
it's pretty much a 7, which isn't that much different from 8.
Because it's 7. Like I think I've said probably on other ones of these, is probably about right around where my average would be, right between 6.5 to 7. So it's right in the middle for me. It's not not my favorite game, but not my least favorite either. It's one that if you have not tried it out and you're in the hobby, I would definitely at least give it at least one play and see if you like it.
Yeah.
And I've heard, I think I've posted about it on Instagram, the times that I play it and I'm getting back to it. I think I've heard that I don't remember what expansion it is, but supposedly that kind of breathed some new life into it I'm trying to remember who it was. Someone on Instagram, and I guess I haven't had a chance to look at that yet. But I'd be interested to see maybe what that brings to it, because I know there's a lot of expansions to this as well. So if it ended up being one that you like, there's definitely a lot of other things you can look at getting and ways you can change up the game. So yeah. But yeah, if you've made it this far and liked the video, you can give it a thumbs up. Or if you like Catan, give us a thumbs up. But if you want to see, some of our future videos of our Chippy reviews or other playthrough videos or unboxings or whatever we may be doing at the time, definitely subscribe and hit the notifications so you'll get alerted when that next one comes out.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we hope to see you on the next one. And as always, don't forget to
keep on nibbling
on those sheepy deep.